We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara in Meseches Baba Kamma. This is Baba Kamma Daf 78a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that kilayim is included in the halacha of Dalet and Hey by Geneva, meaning if a person were to steal an animal that was a mixture, was a hybrid animal, that would still count, and the person would have to pay Dalet v'Hei if they sell or slaughter that animal. And the Gemara said we learned that out from the word O. The idea is that it says in the pasuk shor oseh, and from the context of the pasuk, if it just said shor and seh, a shor and seh are not able to mate, and therefore you would not have included kilayim, and therefore the word o comes to include kilayim. And the Gemara said, how come by kachim, when it comes to animals that are kosher to bring as a carbon, we say the exact opposite? We say that o is actually an exclusion of kilayim. And the Gemara says the reason why we say o is an exclusion of kilayim is because over there in the pasuk it says kesev and a's, and a kesev and an a's, a sheep and a goat are able to mate with one another, and therefore we would have included kilayim, and therefore the word o is an exclusion. And so the Gemara now asks, v'hagabe kachim nami, but by kachim also, namar shor o kesev. It says various animals over there, and it says a shor or a kesev. And again, a shor and kesev, they're not able to mate. They cannot create a hybrid animal. And so therefore, v'nirbi, so then on the contrary, therefore the word o should come along and include kilayim when it comes to karbona. So why are we excluding? And the Gemara says, "Mid the seifel from the fact that the end of the pasuk that we already said the word o there is excluding. So reishanami lamait, we assume also that the o at the beginning of the pasuk is also an exclusion." The Gemara says, "Adrab, on the contrary, mid the reishal rabos, from the fact that in the beginning of the pasuk it would be an inclusion again because shor and a kesev are not able to mate, and therefore the o is an inclusion. So seifa nami larabos. So when it comes to the seifa also kesev and a's, we should say that should be an inclusion." And the Gemara says, "Haimai, what kind of comparison are you making over here? Iyamra bishlama lemayitu. If you're going to say that it's an exclusion, that actually makes sense. The itzrich trei miyute, because we would need two exclusions. Why? The alfagav the imit kilayim, because even though you've excluded kilayim and said the kilayim animal and a kilayim animal cannot be a carbon, itzrich lemute nidme, you also have to exclude a nidme animal. Again, a nidme animal is an animal that doesn't look like its father and mother, and so therefore you would need two exclusions. The point of the Gemara is it would make sense that the word o is stated twice for two exclusions because we do have two things to exclude. Eloi amrit l'rabos, but if you're going to say that it is an inclusion, trei ribuye lama, what do we need to have two inclusions for? Hashta kilayim irbile, if we have already included kilayim, nidme biboy, do we even need to include nidme anymore? And so therefore it makes more sense by kachim to say it's an exclusion. And the Gemara says, Elohadam Rava, but what about that which Rava said? Rava said, Zeb Bona Av, that there's a general rule that we are building. Now this was said by the laws of kashrus. Rava said that there's a general rule that we have, that Kol Mokom Shenemar said, that anytime it says the word seh, Eino Ela Lahotzi Asa Kilayim, what it means to do is it means to exclude kilayim. Now here we're saying that that's not really applicable. Lamai Hilchasa, when do we apply such a rule, such a halacha? Ila Kachim, if you're talking about for karbanos, Behad Yaksibu, we already have a pasuk. It says shor o kesev prat kilayim. It says again shor o kesev, and we understand that excludes kilayim, as we just said. And the Gemara continues, Ila Meiser, if you're going to say that Rava's rule applies to Meiser Behema, that the rules of Meiser Behema don't apply to Kilayim, Tachas Yalef Mikachim, that's not true because we have a Gzer Shaveh. By Kachim it says the word Tachas Imo, and also by Meiser Behema it says Tachas, and therefore we would understand that the halach is the same by Meiser Behema. And Ila Bechor, if you're going to say that the halach of Bechor, a firstborn, doesn't apply by Kilayim, and that's from Rava's rule, Havara Yalef Mi Meiser, we have a Gzer Shaveh over there also. It says Havara by Meiser Behema, and it says Havara by Bechor, and we learn from Meiser Behema that the halach is the same by Bechor. And the Gemara says, Inami, or if you don't want to learn by Bechor from Havara, you could learn a different way by Bechor. Because Nidma Amrit Lo, we already know that an animal that's a Nidma, again, an animal that doesn't look like its father and mother, we know that's not included in the halachas of Bechor. Because it's written Ach Bechor Shor, it says Ach Bechor Shor, Ad Sheyehu Shor Uvechoro Shor, it has to be a Shor, and its firstborn has to be a Shor. So once we know that the halacha of Bechor doesn't apply to a Nidma, Kilayim Iboy, would we even need a source by Kilayim? It's obvious that it doesn't apply by Kilayim. And so still we need to understand that Rava's rule, where does it actually have application? And the Gemara says, Elakiyitmar de Rava, rather, when was Rava's rule stated? In Peter Chamor, it's in terms of the halacha Peter Chamor, that's redeeming the firstborn donkey, Keditznan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Ein Podin, you don't redeem the Peter Chamor, lo be'egel, not with a calf, velo bechaya, not with an undomesticated animal, velo b'shchuta, not with a slaughtered animal, velo b'treifa, not with an animal that's a treifa, that has a mortal wound, velo b'kilayim, and not with kilayim. That's the idea over here. Rava's rule is excluding kilayim from Peter Chamor, velo b'koy, and not with a koy. The Gemara mentions many times that a koy is an animal that's unclear whether it's a behema or a chaya. And Rashi explains, Zila Meister Behem, if you're going to say the rule of Rava, again, the rule of Rava is that anytime it says the word seh, it comes to exclude Kilayim. So if you're going to say that that rule is for Meister Behema, to say that Kilayim is excluded from Meister Behema, and even though it doesn't say the word seh by Meister Behema, El Etzon, it says the word son, but still maybe, Kamma Rava the Puzzle, maybe that's where Rava's rule is applying, and Rava is saying again that Kilayim is disqualified by Meister Behema. But the Gemara then says, but there are many things, the Gemara Tachas HaShavet mitachas imo, that we learn. It says Tachas HaShavet by Meister Behema, it says Tachas imo by Carbon. We learn from one from the other. Hilkach Lahamil So Yolef Nami Upasul. Therefore, we'd already learned it out again from Kachim, from Carbon, and there would be no reason to use Rava's rule for that. And then the Gemara said Havara. Then the Gemara said maybe Rava's rule applies to Bechor, but that also is a Gzeira Shavet. It says Havara, meaning to say it says Havara by Bechor and Havara by Meiser. Vavarta kol Peter Rechem LaHashem. By Bechor it says again Havara. V'chol asher Yavor Tachas HaShavet. Again it says Yavor when it comes to Meiser Behema. And then the Gemara says maybe it's Le'inyan Pidyon Peter Chamor. In terms of the redemption of a Peter Chamor, there's a list of items that you're not able to redeem a Peter Chamor with, and one of them would be Kilayim. T'chsiv, it's written Seh. Over there it's written the word Seh. V'koashminan Rava time of the Masis and the Kotani and Podin Bekilayim Mehachu. And the idea is that Rava is teaching the reason behind the fact that you're not allowed to redeem with Kilayim. V'lo b'chaya, what's examples of chaya? Tzvi v'ayol, a deer and a gazelle. V'lo b'seh, not where they said that is slaughtered. Delav seh karina, but that's not called seh. Kilayim mishnei mine behemos. Kilayim is specifically from two domesticated animals, and koy again is mi behema v'chaya, that comes from a behema and a chaya. And the Gemara continues, Rebbe Lazar, what about according to the opinion of Rebbe Lazar, the matter bekilayim? He says, Pidyon Peter Chamor, you could use kilayim. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Rebbe Lazar matter bekilayim ibnei shuser. Rebbe Lazar allows to use kilayim for the redemption because that is considered a seh. So lamai hilchasa, so for what halach again was Rava's statement made? And the Gemara says, Amar lach Rebbe Lazar will say to you, Ki itmar de Rava, what was Rava talking about? When was his halacha stated? L'tamei shenolad min hatar, you have a situation of a non-kosher animal that is born from a kosher mother, v'iburo min hatami, but the father is actually a non-kosher animal, and so that's where it's saying you have that kind of kilayim, that's going to be excluded. As Rashi says, L'tamei shenolad min hatar, para sheyolda sus v'aviv sus, meaning a cow gives birth to a horse, and the father is a horse. O rachel sheyolda chazir v'aviv chazir, you could have a sheep that gives birth to a pig, the father is a pig. The aser ba'achila, how do we know that's aser, that's forbidden to eat? T'chsiv, as it's written, Zosa v'hema, asher tochelu shor seh kesavim, it says the word seh there, v'kevan d'chsiv seh, prat l'kilayim ki agavnu, and since it says the word seh, that comes to exclude kilayim in exactly this situation. That's what Rava's halacha teaches us. And the Gemara continues with the local Rabbi Yoshua, that would not follow Rabbi Yoshua's teaching. Dear Rabbi Yoshua, because if it was following Rabbi Yoshua, misei kesavim v'se'izim nafkala, he learns that from a different pasuk, from seh kesavim v'se'izim, meaning he agrees with the halacha, but he learns it from a different source. We learn from that pasuk ad sheyei aviv keves v'imo kifsa, it has to be that the father is a sheep and the mother is a sheep. And the Gemara asks, but could you even have such a case where a kosher animal is born from a non-kosher animal? And to that the Gemara says, in yes, the kaimalon, as we've established. And Rashi explains, is it even possible to have such an animal, that we would need to exclude that animal, that it's not kosher? Didn't we establish in the first parak of Bechoros, that on the contrary, you can't have a non-kosher mother animal become pregnant from a kosher father animal, and vice versa also does not work. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Beis.